Programs for the Sewing Connection, Series 15, Program 6. Everyone can take a beautiful piece of fabric and make it into a beautiful garment, right? But who can take something impossible and bring out the best in it? Accept the challenge and see what we can do to transform a warty frog into a handsome prince. Now, this is a handsome prince to start out with. I'd like you to look at this model who is wearing a really pretty jacket. This is by Polly Truk of Arvada, Colorado, and this jacket is a white and off-white wool gabardine, and she has covered it with all these pretty shapes in black silk, and she's embroidered them all before she put it on, and then just arranged them on and did a little stitch around the edge to applique them on. So isn't that pretty? When I saw this on Polly, I thought, yes, here's an idea. Here's something I can do with a jacket that I have at home. Now, you've seen this jacket before. It's down on the table now, and you've seen it several ways because I made it 15 years ago, but you can still see the same one in stores, so some things just don't go out of style. But where I have transformed it previously is, instead of just the plain white jacket, one time I had it with stars and stripes on it. Another time I had it with lace on it around the neck and down there at the wrist. And this time I took it all off when I saw Polly's jacket to decide that I'm going to do something with black and white because it really is striking, really pretty. And I shouldn't have done this because it wasn't soiled, but I did, just for whatever reason. Sent it to cleaners. They really did a number on it, I'll tell you. And what I have here is a scorch job on the back of the sleeve that wasn't there when it was sent. And also I have a really strange spot that looks like a water spot on the back of it. It must be on the other side. Yes, right here. I had 3 letters the same week from women who said they had flood problems and they had white wool coats, all 3 of them, white wool coats that the cleaners couldn't get the spots out of. Well, remember this spot. I'm going to show you something in a little bit that we can do to cover that over. But in the meantime, I'm going to do this in black and white. So what I have here is a little trim, a big trim actually, and this trim is big enough that it would actually cover up those scorched spots, so I could put this around the sleeve, and then I could also put it somewhere on the jacket, maybe here, maybe I could position it so this goes around the buttonhole. Whatever works out. Play with it a while and see. But trims like this are readily available in the stores, and you might be able to transform something old into something new and wonderful by doing that. Then I'd like you to look again back at the models. You would never believe where this colorful jacket came from. Lorraine Isaacs made it, and she's from Petaluma, California. But just look how it's all kind of tiered. Do you notice that? See how there are seams and there are different colorful fabrics here and there. And see how there is a slight gathering everywhere on one side of each of those seams. Well, maybe you can and maybe you can't see that. I would never have thought of doing this, and it's so clever. Let's see where it actually came from now. Down here on the table, I have a diagram Lorraine sent me to show me how she made that. It started out as one of those lightweight cotton skirts from India, a tiered skirt like this where every layer is gathered more, and it made into this jacket. And the way she did that is to turn the skirt upside down, and here you can see the bands were on the top and the body of the jacket is here and the sleeves were there. Isn't that clever? I just love to put heads together with all these clever people all over the country and see what other people do. Also from Lorraine, here's a fun one, and what she has done here on the table is this ugly fabric. They had an ugly contest, or an ugly fabric contest, in their sewing guild. They all brought their ugliest piece of fabric, wrapped it in a gift wrap, put it on a table. Everybody took a gift package home, and the next meeting they came to, they all brought something made out of that ugly fabric. So here's how it started out. She dyed it, and it came out like this. And she said, you wouldn't believe what happens when you sprinkle salt on wet dye or paint or whatever. So let's see it on a model and see what happened. Well, what happens is that dye migrates. And she said she has never painted before. This is her first attempt, but it migrated. And the way it made spots here and there from the salt as it spread the dye, it kind of looked like this scene. So she just embellished it a little bit with some paint and a brush and made this. Isn't this fun? She did win the contest at this ugly fabric contest that they had because it was such a complete transformation. And then something else very pretty on the model is this one by Dawn McIntyre of Coos Bay, Oregon. And hers started out as white silk. And white silk is by no means ugly, it's pretty in itself. But this is persistence, is what we have here. She first of all dyed it, and she didn't like the color, and then she sprayed it and still didn't like the color, and then she painted it and stamped it and did all kinds of things on it. Look how beautifully it turned out. It was certainly well worth the effort. Another one that started out as white silk and then is transformed with some pretty dye and paint is this jacket from Elda Coles of Fort Collins, Colorado. And isn't this gorgeous? All burgundies and reds and just a little touch of blue and green. And this is all silk fabric painting. And I just admire these people so much who can do this. Now next year I am going to do some of my own because I'm going to learn how to do it. I'm actually going to take a class to find out something that I don't know about. So there's Elda's pretty. And then let's see something else. This is by June Grieg of St. Louis. You've seen a couple of her things before. And now the coat all in itself is pretty. It's a suede coat. And look how she has transformed some print fabric by cutting it in 1/4-inch strips and knitting it all along with some of that straw, that raffia gift wrap type cord. She has knit them together into this scarf, but the real show is the inside of this coat is what I think is such fun. She had some fabric in her stash that was all faded along the folds and didn't look too great. So when this coat is flipped open, you can see what she's done with that lining. She has taken some gold finger paint of all things and just did a lot of scrawly gold pieces all over it. And then with a ballpoint pen, she did all that, what looks like prehistoric cave painting. Isn't that a beautiful fabric out of an old throwaway? Well, this is fun, isn't it? What do you have in your closet you can do this to? Well, let's look for a minute at my vest that I'm wearing. And this was warped also that I hopefully turned into something a little better. I found this in my stash and I thought, why did I buy that? It looks like mud and it looks like maybe just a little touch of purple in it, but basically it's mud. And I thought, but what if I can pink it up? What if I can make it look a little pinky purpley? Well, I've also transformed my wardrobe by mixing a few years together. This blouse I have has to be about, at least a dozen years old or more. But I keep wearing it. It keeps going with new things that I make, and I like that old and new together. The skirt is undoubtedly 5 years old because that was way back on, Series 4. And then this is the new vest. Well, what I did, and I don't know, I wet it. And when I got it wet, because I thought, well, that's how you wrinkle fabric. You wet it and then you twist it all up. This one wouldn't stay. It just popped right back out. But in wetting it, it got some really funny streaks, and that's okay. That kind of adds to the character to it, so I don't mind. I found also in the same shelf just a little piece of hand-dyed silk that really matched it very well, so that's what I've used for the binding around here. But come to the ironing board and I'll show you how I did this. Since I couldn't really do anything with wetting it, I ended up by just on the ironing board with some fusible interfacing cut out in the vest shape, and I had the fusible side up. And I just did a lot of crinkling here with my fingers, and then I'd put some pins in each side. And of course you need to put them in kind of flat so that it will stay wrinkled and so you can actually put the iron on. But I did a whole lot of wrinkling like this, and once I had it all wrinkled nicely, and if it doesn't wrinkle enough the first time, go ahead and press it, and if you want more wrinkles, press it again after you get a few more in. When you're doing things like this, you really can do no wrong. You just play around with it and see what comes of it. And it's a good idea to either put a press cloth on this, or else if you don't put a press cloth on, you better be sure that you have a sole plate on your iron so that it won't go directly on the suede. Well, anyway, let's crinkle it a little bit more and then press. And I do have a sole plate, so I'll just go ahead and do that. And so it's just a matter of pressing it like this. And when I get it flattened enough, it is flattening itself, of course, to that interfacing that's down below. So when I really get a good hard fuse here, and I'll just turn the exhaust on so we don't steam up the place too much. But once you get all that all nicely wrinkled and all fused down, then you take it to the machine and put some pretties on it. Some metallic threads maybe, or cords. I wound some of these around. I wanted to pink it up, make it look a little pink instead of the mud that it now looks, and maybe a little bit of purple cord. And after I put those down, I just did a lot of stitching in metallic threads, and maybe I do a little design here and there, just stay in one place and work around with it back and forth to get more thread on. Put some beads on it afterwards. There are so many pretty combinations that you can find in the shops that you can get just a little bit of this and that yarn and put a lot of things on it. I also wanted to have some buttons on this, and I put some big beads and some little beads on it by hand. And then I wanted some buttons on it. Well, I only had 2 like this, and I had 2 that looked a little bit like it, but not quite. Has it ever occurred to you that nobody sees your back and front at the same time? So I have these 2 in front, and I have 2 different ones in back that attach that belt with a lot of the cords that make the belt. Works out just fine. Nobody but you will ever know that I have different buttons on this, so it works out just very well. Well, there's a skirt I'd like to show you also that's a lot of fun. How about transforming a skirt that can be not only this lavender, and it's a long skirt, it's cut on the bias, so it keeps getting longer all the time, and I might have to shorten it a little bit, which is no problem because it's a rolled hem down at the bottom. But what this skirt transforms to is a couple of other colors. I can also just turn it inside out, and instead of that lavender skirt, I can have this kind of emerald green skirt. Or instead of this emerald green skirt, I can take the middle layer and turn that around and put the green layer inside the skirt, and I can have this kind of olivey skirt too. Well, now this goes with a whole lot of different things. By the time you have 3 colors, put 4 colors if you want, all in one skirt. Wouldn't this be an easy way to pack? Think of that cruise, have 4 skirts, 3 skirts in one. I have 3 of them here. And the hem is just, you know, it doesn't matter if some part stretches out longer than others because you want to see all those colors at once as it hangs there. And so it makes it very pretty. Now, where did the pattern come from? Well, it's very easy to start with a patterner. And of course, this one, the skirt pattern, just goes out to make a flared skirt if you'd like to have it. So that's one way you can do it. Also, what mine was, I had a definite amount of fabric and no more. What I had was 2.5 yards of fabric, 45-inch fabric. And so I thought, okay, I don't want to waste any of this. What am I going to do with all of it to make this skirt as full as possible and yet use all the fabric? What I actually did is this without a pattern. And I had it folded like this on my cutting table. So here's the fold of it. Remember, I said I had 2.5 yards, so by the time I folded it over lengthwise, the fold from the bolt would have been here in the middle somewhere. But by the time I folded it out, I had 1.25 yards is what it is this long since it's folded in half. And I decided all I needed to know, because I'm going to put elastic on the waist in a band and just have it elasticized, and don't make that elastic too wide, because if you're going to turn it back and forth, including the middle layer, and have one layer go over, you want kind of narrow elastic there so that it doesn't really matter. Now this skirt's going to be worn under jackets, so you'll never see the waistband, so that part of it really didn't matter much. But okay, all I needed to know is how big this has to be, this opening here at the neck, at the curve here at the waist. How big does it really have to be to pull over my hips? So just take your tape measure and measure down on the stitching line where it's going to be how big this is, and if it's not quite big enough, cut it down a little bit lower. All this is a semicircle, and it's just, this is the waist, this is what I cut out of it, this is what was here at the top. So that much cut out, just make one seam in it, and then it's a rolled hem around the bottom of each of the different layers, and then just attach them together, stitch the 3 waistlines together, and put your waistband on it, which in this case was all that I had left over. Was I didn't want it to come down to points, and very often skirts, you know, like this uneven hemline, the handkerchief hemline, they do come down in points. Well, those points were going to hang too long, drag on the floor. So I cut a big triangle off that edge, so I had that extra fabric to either make the waistband or to do whatever I wanted to with it. And so that's where the waistband came from. It is, if I can get back to it, here it is just that bias strip that came off the bottom that I put like a big piece of bias tape, really, to put on the waistband and covered over the elastic band with it. So let's go over to the machine, to the serger, and see how this is made, or how it's hemmed. In case you haven't done a rolled hem on serger, it really does look nice, and it's the quickest way by far that you can do it. And so I just have some of my scraps left over here that I cut from there, and it's this easy. You just convert your machine to rolled hem, and you change the thread tension somewhat, and once you have those things changed, then it's just time to push the power and let it go. So you can see how quick and easy that would be, because this hem is just, yards and yards long, but it does a really nice job of that. And if it ripples a little bit, the iron will take care of it. Just press it out smoothly and you'll be just fine. So a rolled hem in that, and I said that that's hanging a little long. If it's hanging too long, when I put on heels, if it's still too long, I can just a little corner here and there whack off as I hem it a little shorter with the rolled hem. Don't even need to cut it, just put it in there, and the cutting blade on the serger will do the job for you. So that's going to be a nice job also. It's going to be a very wearable little outfit. Would you like to see how that looks on a model? Let's just take a look at that. And I have two jackets actually that it works with really well, because the colors that I used in that just happen to be the same. This one was in Series 3, so it's an old jacket, but it's just a nice boxy jacket. Put on a shell and put on that skirt, and any of those three colors exactly match the jacket. So it doesn't matter which side you have out and which side in, you just have that good change. Or if you, instead of this one, if you'd rather have a little bit smaller fitted jacket, we can do that. This one is completely different. This one is a silk, a raw silk really, and it has this print on it, and it matches all three colors also. So either way, we've got a jacket to wear, and it's kind of nice to have it do double duty when you go traveling if you don't want to take much along with you. Then remember that coat that I had back there, or that jacket that was white and it had those spots that I needed to obscure? Well, there are some ways we can do that. And the way I'm going to be doing that is to do a little miracle stitching. Now, you've probably seen me do this on former series, but this is really a fun process that I absolutely love to do. And what it is simply couching yarn down to a fabric, whatever that fabric might be, or use whatever yarns you want to use. And here's a miracle stitcher, and what this does, what it has inside the box, is this foot, and that foot just has a little round hole in, not very big, and there's a little slot in the edge of it. And then it also has another little gadget, which is this little cup, and it attaches to the needle screw. It just clamps on, and what that little cup does is hold the yarn or the cord or whatever it is you're going to couch. It holds it in place, and with that all held in place, then you can zigzag over it, and it just stitches it all down, and it works out really very nicely. Well, what you need also is an extra spool pin, because I want to put that up here in the top of my machine so that I can just loop the yarn around there to get it in position. Now, what you need to be careful with when you do any miracle stitching is don't let that pull too tightly. You know, sometimes if you have a ball of yarn or whatever, it pulls. This I don't have rolled into a ball. It's just as it came off this skein. I'll just drop it down here or drop it in my lap or let it fall on the floor for that matter, and it's going to be just fine to go ahead as long as I keep it loose so it keeps on feeding. Now, I also am going to need with this to have a zigzag stitch, so I'll just push the zigzag button here, and I don't want it to be this wide, because standardly it's 1.5 millimeters wide is what, or long. That's the length, that's the stitch length. And I also don't need to worry about that, because I've dropped the feed dog and it's going to just stitch the way I push it, so that doesn't concern me. This is what concerns me, and 1.5 is what I want here. So instead of 5 millimeters wide, I'm going to just push that button until we come down to 1.5. Because what would happen if you'd get wider than that, remember I said this just has a little hole in there, not very big. It's big enough for that 1.5 millimeters to zigzag back and forth, but if I would have it any bigger than that, more than likely that needle would hit the foot and break, and so be sure you do that. Be sure also that you put the feed dog down, because you are going to be just doing some free motion stitching here, so you don't want to have it guiding you, you want to guide it. And then let's consider some of the things that we might put on this. Now, as I was thinking about the 3 women, all of them with the white coats who had flood damage on them, I thought, well, maybe they want to go colorful, but then again, maybe they would like to stay just kind of neutral because just texture would be pretty. So that's why I have this linen yarn here, and it's about the same color as what I'm putting it on. Actually, this is bale bagging that I'm putting it on, but it's about the same color. Now, you might find that depending on the fabric you're using, you might find that you need to put this in a hoop so that you can move it around more easily and so that it keeps it stretched out. That might be the best way to do it. All you know is to try it on a scrap and see what happens. Or maybe if you just put some stabilizer under it, I have a couple of layers here which will then tear off very easily after I get the stitching done. That might be sufficient. Or maybe you want some of the melt away or the water soluble or that will dissolve with heat. Whatever, figure out by trying it on scraps what's the best for your fabric and also for the cord or the yarn that you're going to couch on it. Well, I'm going to try this linen yarn, but here are some other choices. If you want to put a little color in, now this yarn would work really well. This is a mohair and it has a loop in it. And that loop could cause you some problems, probably not on this. I imagine it would go just very well. But if you tried to couch this on with, for instance, a cord foot or a braid foot that would hold this in place while you zigzag over it, that loop could get caught and make some problems. So try it on a scrap definitely first. Also, remember, if you use a braid foot or a cord foot, all you can do is forward. You can't go forward. You can't go backward, or you're going to run into some problems because going back, it'll get tangled. You can't do that. So this is what I like about the Miracle Stitcher foot, the fact that I can go in any direction and I'm not hampered by anything. I'm not confined by anything. So this would be one choice. It has a little glint in it and just a little bit of metallic in it, and that might be really pretty. Now what I'm couching this down with is just monofilament thread, the clear thread, so it won't show at all. But it could be pretty if you would use maybe a little metallic thread if you wanted that look to it. Or here's another one. This one is a silk yarn, and it's variegated, so that could be interesting too, in that you could get some of the same color and then you could get just a gentle look of a few other pastels in it, but keep it pale, and that could be pretty. Think about couching that on so that you develop a scene, like Lorraine's jacket that she painted a scene on. I can see with this variegated yarn we could get maybe some shrubs and trees and some pretty things going there. From some previous project, I had these little balls made. If I would use that, I would probably use these little, I think they were called Brazilian something or others, and I would probably put these on too, just because I have them here. It'd be good to use them. Or here's another silk yarn, and again variegated, but in a few different colors. Or here I have another mohair, and this one is variegated pinks to blues. So go through yarns, go in a yarn shop. Even if you don't knit, a yarn shop is well worth a trip because I just love that wall full of colors that they have with all the yarns. Well, let me try this and see what happens, and see if we can't pretty that up. Now remember, the cleaners put a spot on mine, and it just looks like a big water spot there on one side of it. Well, the edge is what I especially would like to cover. If the spot is right here, it's that edge I would especially like to cover by going around here and there and see what we can do there to obscure it. And you don't have to cover the whole thing, because once you cover up the joining, the line where the spot starts, then the rest of it really won't show the fact that it's a slightly different color. So that might be just a good way to do it. So yes, thank you for telling me, but I knew I had my feed dog down. Okay. So this is the idea. You just go around here and there, and it wouldn't take me long at all to go ahead and cover that. Now see where I missed here? I don't have any yarn going. What that's telling me is it's pulling too tightly, and so it doesn't matter a bit. You haven't done anything that's a permanent distress signal there, because all I need to do is back up again, go over the area again, and this time, because my yarn's loose, this time it will couch on and it won't give any problems. So there's not just one chance to do this. You can do it repeatedly and see what happens with it. I can see this would be pretty in that variegated yarn. I think I might do some of that on my suit. Now I've transformed that suit so many times that if I do this, it's permanent. It's going to stay there for all time. And so I want to really make up my mind, if I do anything this permanent, exactly what it will do and how it's going to react. Think of some other things that you might do to cover that over. If you wanted to paint a scene, for instance, think how easily you could paint a scene by taking some other fabrics and just, you don't have to be an artist, just a little streak of this and a little streak of that ends up looking like a landscape with mountains or hills or lakes or whatever. Try some of that. Just get a little daring. Remember, this is a project that's ruined anyway. It's something that you can't wear anyway, so big deal. What's the difference? Speaking of transformations, I'd like you to look at one of my very favorite paintings. When I bought this, the artist knew I was a sewer, and he said, come into the back room and I'd like to show you how these canvases all start. That isn't canvas at all that he paints on. Can you believe transforming a piece of non-woven interfacing by putting some paint on and making something very, very nice? I love it. Would that I could paint as he does, but we can all paint on fabric. So if you can't do it one way, you all have the talent that you can do something really pretty on your clothing and transform those things that sort of needed to bite the dust, make them pretty. Well, if you had fun with that, isn't it just like finding out that that ugly weed might actually burst into a beautiful bloom someday? It's also amazing how you can create flowers in fabric. Come along next time for Flower Power.